Welcome everybody to Blood on the Mic. I'm your host, David Mercado, and this here is my co-host,
Louis Torna.
and we're going to be talking about all things music. Today, in particular, we're going to be talking about a genre that was very popular in the early 90s, although it started in the mid to late 80s. Talking about the Seattle scene of grunge.
Yeah, this is a new type of video that we're going to be doing. We usually do like artist breakdowns, the band report. This is another one called genre breakdown, where we tackle a genre of music that was influential or just that we want to tackle, one that we liked.
Yeah. So today we're going to be covering, instead of like one particular band, we're actually going to tackle 5 different albums that kind of encompass what was going on in the grunge scene.
Yes. So, I mean, I didn't plan. Should we tell them ahead of time what the albums are, or should we do it one at a time? Let's do it one at a time.
Let's do it. Yeah, I guess let's do it one at a time. But
so
I guess are we trying to put some banter in here? We were just talking
okay.
about,
Do some banter.
Yeah, I think throughout the show I might want to kind of like mimic some of the vocals.
So yeah, grunge was an era of very distinct vocals. There's a few bands that had the lead singers, you know, you knew who they were when you saw them, when you heard them. You couldn't be mistaken.
Yeah, and if you ever go to a cocktail party, you can try to imitate Eddie Vedder or
what's
Chris
your imitation
Cornell of Eddie Vedder?
Yeah.
Well, I after watching that episode of Portlandia, I always go to the one sound that the tattoo of Eddie Vedder did. It's like, oh yeah.
You're making him sound like you kind of sound like what's his name from Metallica when you do that. What's his name? The lead singer.
I forget his name.
It kind of sounds like Metallica doing Pearl Jam.
That's okay. All right, maybe I should like tone it back a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's a little better.
Okay.
Do your Chris Cornell.
Chris Cornell. I was just listening to I'm gonna break my rusty Cajun roll.
I think your Chris Cornell is better.
Chris Cornell, I think, is better. Actually,
it's pretty good. You can do a Soundgarden cover band. I would believe it.
That would be quite fun, I guess, to do that. Yeah, I think if we ever cover Smashing Pumpkins, who sometimes is thrown in with the same grunge cover, but they're not really a grunge band. I used to have a pretty good Billy Corgan. I haven't practiced it in a while, so I gotta see exactly how it sounds these days.
You don't want to give him a little hint at it? You don't want to like put a peek?
A little peek of Billy Corgan?
Billy Corgan. When we cover like 90s alternative.
90s alternative. I mean, I think Smashing Pumpkins is worth a whole episode. Not that these bands aren't, but like, you know.
Just give me Billy Corgan real quick.
Billy Corgan. Well, why am I blanking out on all the songs right now? Today is the greatest. Unpracticed, completely unpracticed. Haven't practiced this.
No, you didn't rehearse that one?
No, I did not rehearse that one.
Oh my god, I couldn't. There's no way I would have known that. Okay.
Anyways, get back to this.
So grunge was people associated with the early 90s around there, which is where the height of grunge really was, but it started in the mid 80s with the band Green River was the first, well, what Wikipedia says, they had the first grunge album.
Yeah, they were,
or grunge record, really.
Yeah. So I guess gotta like to compile, to take it back even one step further. Grunge was not originally set up to be any particular sound. I think it was just a sound that kind of naturally came about. But it was...
So yeah, let's define what grunge is then first.
Yeah, so grunge is kind of a combination of things. First of all, it's rooted in hardcore punk. Punk in America, at least the way it worked in America was that it was based by scenes. And you know, you had your DC scene, Washington, D.C., that's where you had... Scott McKay,
Ian
McKay
for Minor Threat and
Minor Threat,
Fugazi later.
Yeah, and I think you had another band in there as well, but whatever. Then you had your LA scene, your early LA scene, not the later LA scene. The early LA scene with SST Records, Black Flag, Minutemen, and Meat Puppets also. In there. Yeah.
I mean, a Minutemen and Meat Puppets hardcore. I guess they're part of the hardcore scene,
They're
but they're not
part of
really
the scene.
pure hardcore.
Yeah. Yeah, Minutemen definitely had like a different sound.
Minutemen are one of my favorite bands. I love them. So
Yeah.
but
those bands I think were some of the more influential ones on the Seattle sound.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of like where the sound of it kind of starts, you know. But the Seattle sound was particular just because of how much of Black Sabbath, in particular, they incorporated into it.
Yeah, grunge is really a melding of a lot of different genres. Well, not really a lot, just a few different genres of rock. You really had the punk, slash hardcore punk element, the classic rock element, like bands like Led Zeppelin and The Who.
Yeah, Led Zeppelin is a big one.
And the metal influence, where most of them were influenced like a lot by Black Sabbath, and then others were like really metal. They had a really hard metal sound.
Yeah, some bands had
a
much stronger connection to metal, but Black Sabbath I think is one that everybody could agree on.
Yeah, Black Sabbath is like the linchpin for all of them, whereas some would delve further into like the heavier metal stuff, and then because Black Sabbath is barely metal, like they're the beginning of metal.
They're like the beginning of metal.
They're like the what's the word? They're like the transition from classic rock to metal. They're like right in between.
Yeah. They're like metal, but like they're not so deep into metal that like you get sucked into like that. The whole genre, but yeah, it's like the roots of it.
Yeah. But like we said, this is a genre in Seattle, and because every 90% of the bands that were grunge, or really 100%, were based in Seattle. It was a pretty incestuous scene in the fact that a lot of these bands, like they've shared
members. They all collaborate with each other.
They all collaborated.
I don't know if you guys can see in my notes. I put a little bit of a chart connecting all the bands together, and we're gonna try to describe it as we go through today.
So what the first grunge? I guess the linchpin grunge band would be like Green River, which incorporated two members of Pearl Jam.
Yes.
What were their names?
Yeah, it was the Stone Gossard and Jeff Ament.
Yeah, and also the guitarist and lead singer for Mudhoney, Mark Arm.
Yes.
So really, that was kind of like a pre-supergroup band, I guess.
In a sense, and it was so funny because they. Not only were they like the first one to have like some sort of a grungy sound, they broke up because the two guys that would form Pearl Jam could not agree with the other two guys who formed Mudhoney.
And if you hear those two bands, they sound pretty different.
Yeah, pretty different. The guys from Pearl Jam wanted to have more of a classic rock influence, and then the guys from Mudhoney really wanted to keep it in the punk scene.
Yeah. So, like I was saying before, Green River. They released their EP Come On Down in 1985, and people say that's like the first grunge record. So really it starts in the mid 80s. Mm-hmm. And then there's a lot of underground grunge acts happening in the late mid 80s. Yeah,
you can find some of those earlier ones in there's a compilation called the Deep Six, which has a few of those bands, and Soundgarden's actually one of the ones.
Yeah, because they were going on in the mid 80s. They didn't really hit big until later in the 90s, but they were still like doing stuff in the 80s.
Soundgarden's one of those few bands that like were there from the beginning, and like they didn't break up or
But some other ones were like the Screaming Trees, the Melvins, even though that was like way like metal,
that was a lot earlier. Yeah, but the Melvins were pretty influential in the sound they had. They were the ones who brought in that like heavy metal influence into the hardcore scene.
Like it's like I listened to a little bit of the Melvins doing this, and they were like really heavy.
Yeah,
but like super slow. It's like it's really interesting. I like it.
I think some people call it like sludge metal. I think it's it doesn't sound exactly like grunge.
Yeah, and a lot of grunge does have that sound where it's kind of like slowed down metal. Not a lot. Some of the grunge sounds have like slowed down sludgy tone to them.
Yeah,
that I really like. But those are some of the underground ones. So what we're trying to do here is pick 5 albums that kind of encapsulate different sounds in the grunge genre. So for this early grunge, we picked Mudhoney's album, Superfuzz, Bigmuff. So that was an EP.
It was an EP
released in 1988.
But then later in 1990, it was re-released with some of the early singles. and it pretty much became album length at that point.
So yeah,
it was repackaged.
Mm-hmm. And so Mudhoney was formed after Green River broke up. So, like you said, the two members, Stone Gossard and whatever the other guy's name was. I'm terrible with names. I can never remember.
Jeff Hammond. I mean, I had to write it down.
Yeah. So they went off to form Pearl Jam. So Mark Arm went off to form Mudhoney. And in 1988, he released Superfuzz Bigmuff on Sub Pop Records, which would be the grunge record label.
Yeah. He also brought in one of the guys from the Melvins into that band. So that's another connection that you have in there. But yeah, Superfuzz Bigmuff, named after the two pedals that they love to use, which really gave him that quality of the sound of like the fuzz, you know?
Yeah. So that was in 1988. So like we said, it was an EP. But what we're really going to be talking about is Superfuzz Bigmuff and early singles, which was released in 1990, which just collected also the singles that were happening around that time. So all the stuff is from 1988, but the full collection of all the songs wouldn't be released till 1990.
Yeah. All right, cool. So how do we want to kind of approach this?
Well, Mudhoney, I think, encapsulates the early underground grunge scene because I think it's a lot more punk influence than a lot of the other grunge bands that would come later on.
Yeah, it was still very much in touch with that.
And it had that sludgy sound, that really distorted punk sound, and I think there's very little elements of like classic rock in there.
There's not really so many. I tried breaking down each of these bands and sounds to what their influences are. I think Mudhoney is probably one of the easiest ones because, like, you know, the sound of grunge was still developing, so a lot of his influences were still like.
Yeah, at this point, you could really say it was like an offshoot of punk, if anything.
Yeah. So, but like, I mean, something that straight up distinguishes them is that like there's a lot of songs on here that have influences from the garage rock bands from the 60s, especially the later 60s, like MC5, or maybe a little bit with the Stooges, and with it comes a lot of like 60s chord progressions and melodies, which you don't get to see a lot in other punk movements. But also, like we said before, like the Black Sabbath influence in a lot of these other songs. But definitely, like MC5 was something that like really stuck out to me when listening to, especially.
Yeah, now that you mentioned that, it does sound a lot like MC5, but like just more distorted, I guess, and more like sludgy sounding. Yeah,
especially like the single that really broke through, or like at least nowadays they're known for "Touch Me, I'm Sick."
Yeah, which I think is the best song on here.
I think it's my second favorite song on here. But you go ahead.
I love that punk energy in that song, and you know, it sounds like that early 60s garage rock stuff, that MC5 type stuff. But just that real, you know, kick out the jams type energy, but with that grunge sound, that, you know, really fuzzed out guitar, that kind of sludgy tone. And it's one of the faster songs on here, one of the more upbeat ones, because there's a lot of like slower, sludgier stuff on there. There are a lot of
slower songs. This one's more energetic. It kind of comes straight at you.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, it's got a good hook too. Like that's one thing that I gotta say is that, you know, maybe at the time a lot of people thought that this was kind of a very loud and messy sound compared to what was popular at the time. But if you were to compare it to like other hardcore punk bands, or like even like the Melvins and like other bands in the scene, these guys, like the vocal wise, are like pretty cleaned up. I don't know, at least like they.
Well, I think of the grunge bands, they were screaming a lot and stuff, and like, because like later on they would be singing and stuff, like actually professionally singing, like especially people like Eddie Vedder and Chris Cornell, who had pretty great voices.
Right. And, but like I'm saying that like even at this point you can see that this scene is not like a lot of the other hardcore punk scenes, in that it's a little bit more open to having easier to listen vocals. More melodic, or like
Yeah, but I think it still leaned a little bit more towards that hardcore punk type of vocals, where they were introducing like melody and stuff in there and more easy to listen to stuff, but it still really leaned towards that like screaming delivery, and at least on a lot of songs.
Yeah, no, they did. Yeah, they definitely did. And I mean, a lot of these songs will vary by style. Some of them are more obviously like more Black Flag influence, like the song 24. I thought was very like, like part of like the hardcore scene. Just maybe with a little bit more overdrive fuzz to it. But then other songs like Sweet Young Thing and Sweet No More, that one was more slow and like more savage kind of thing. I might as well go ahead and tell you what my favorite one is. My favorite one is In and Out of Grace.
I love that one. Yeah. That's another one that's up there with me. So
yeah, I like that song, and actually I like all the songs that were part of the EP, like the original EP. I thought those songs were some of the more solid ones. It's towards the end of the release, at least the way that like it was formatted in the version that we heard. Some of these other songs, especially the covers, didn't hit me quite the same way. But
yeah, and also because of that, I didn't listen to just the EP. I listened to the whole thing, and I probably should have listened to the way that it was released as EP, because it was hard to judge this one as an album because it wasn't an album. It's a collection. It's like a compilation.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, as an album, I really didn't like it that much. I thought there was a lot of great songs on there, a lot of cool ideas, but like a lot of it started to sound like too similar, and listening became tedious at points. And
yeah, no, you're kind of right. I think at least the way that I like listened to it, the release that I listened to, what I did like was that it was very front heavy. It was heavy. It was loaded heavily in the front. But yeah, definitely towards the end, I was just like, I don't really want to.
What do you think of the Sonic Youth cover? Because I actually liked the Sonic Youth cover, the Halloween.
I didn't think it was bad. I couldn't make up my mind if I like this version or the Sonic Youth version more. I think you know that
But you don't really like.
I'm not really like huge on Sonic Youth.
I really want to do a Sonic Youth episode just to make him hate his life, at least for the first portion of the episode. Because later Sonic Youth you like, but early Sonic Youth, I like it, but you really don't.
Yeah, no, they came out of that no wave scene, and I'm just not about that.
We need to do a no wave episode too.
No wave episode.
I can see you lighting up. Okay, wait, let's do it. We'll do a yacht rock episode and then a no wave episode.
Okay. I'll agree to that sort of that kind of compromise there. But no, I mean that song In and Out of Grace, to come back to it, I thought that one was kind of special because not only did it sound like MC5, but also it reminded me a little bit of like Dinosaur Jr. and like some of the other alternative that was going on at the time.
Yeah, when was Dinosaur? That was like late 80s, Dinosaur Jr.
Yeah,
so they were happening
like
around the same
87,
time.
88, those were like some of their biggest albums. But yeah, though that song seemed less of like let's play like our favorite bands, and it seemed more like, hey, we're like actually in touch with what was going on at this time.
Mudhoney just seems like a good starting off point. Like they had a lot of interesting ideas, and they had a lot of good songs at this point, but I don't think it was enough to make a great album.
I mean, I think probably the best thing about it is just the influences that I think it brings more than any other one of the other bands.
It sets a tone for what grunge will be, or what grunge was at the time.
It's Sabbath, it's Black Flag, it's I don't even know how much Led Zeppelin is actually in here.
I wouldn't say a lot of Led Zeppelin in it.
But there's MC5 in here, and like I mean I think it's a band like Nirvana. I think probably got the most out of this, simply because of like a lot of the '60s stuff that's kind of of the early,
of the bigger grunge acts, I think Nirvana is the one that stuck more to this sound than any of the other ones did.
Yeah. Also, by this point, the drop D tuning is pretty standard throughout all this. Drop D. I mean, if grunge was to be replaced with another name, it would be like drop D.
Well, drop D is like standard tuning for any like heavy genre.
Yeah.
Like metal uses drop D.
It would be like drop D heroin.
Drop D and heroin.
Drop D and heroin. Yeah. That's
grunge.
That's grunge in a little bit of a little catchphrase. Drop D and heroin.
Yeah. That should be the name of the episode, even though we don't really name the episodes anymore, but that would be a good one.
No, but I don't know. You got anything else to say about this release?
No, I mean, people like love this release. Like, I saw stuff online, like people rated highly and stuff. And
I mean, I really like it.
I like it, but to me, it just sounds like the beginning of a movement, but not really like its peak or anything. Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, I did find some Led Zeppelin actually in the song "If I Think." I thought that one was interesting. It had a little bit of that soft, loud dynamic, which we'll see more of later on. And I thought it's a little bit of a ballad, and in terms of a ballad, it kind of reminded me of Led Zeppelin, but it's not the most obvious one of the other things. But yeah, no, that's my take on.
Yeah, I don't have much else to say about this album.
Yeah, I think it's pretty representative of those of the late '80s. Like
it's very late '80s sounding, like just in general, like even with the grunge and all that, it sounds like the late '80s.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we'll fast forward over here. I mean, a lot of other bands had releases in between when this release came out. Some of these bands we'll talk about, like Nirvana had a release, Bleach.
Their first album, yeah.
Yeah, and then Soundgarden was the first band out of the scene to get signed, and they had several albums like Ultra Mega OK and Louder Than Love. All these albums were like building on this sound, this grunge sound, and there was even a band that is pretty pivotal to what happened in grunge. We talked about before that Stone Gossard. Was it Stone Gossard?
Yeah, Stone Gossard and Jeff.
Yeah, just Stone Gossard and Jeff Ament went on to form Mother Love Bone with a singer called Andrew Wood, and they were kind of like they seemed to be getting ready to break through, kind of like even in a much bigger way than Soundgarden was breaking through. They had a style that was a little bit more akin to the LA scene, a little bit more similar to Guns N' Roses, at least the way that like Andrew Wood kind of portrayed himself, maybe more tied to what was the band Jane's Addiction kind of sounded like, but then Andrew Wood died of a heroin overdose right before their debut album came out.
Very grunge thing to do.
Very, very grunge thing. We'll see this happen
multiple times. And this affected pretty much everybody. I mean, Andrew Wood had lived with I think he had lived with Chris Cornell and like with he was very good friends with Jeffrey Cantrell from yeah. So did everybody in the grunge scene like live on the same block, or like, did they share the same apartment complex? Like,
I think they were all like sharing the same bed together. Basically. Yeah. The only band that like I didn't find anything related to Andrew Wood's death was Nirvana. I think that was the only band that was like a little bit isolated from that whole thing.
Was Nirvana attached much to any of the other like?
Yeah, so Nirvana,
any of the other grunge bands?
I know not too much.
They were attached to the Melvins because they, Chris Novoselic and Kurt Cobain went to high school with what's his name from the Melvins, basically the people from the Melvins.
Yeah.
So, but the Melvins are tangentially attached to grunge, not really firmly in grunge. So
they were there. The Melvins. Yeah, they took influence from the Melvins. They knew the Melvins. I think that at some point they had a small collaboration with one of the guys, but. The band that they have maybe most interaction with directly was Mudhoney, and that's because both of them were part of Mudhoney in particular. They went on to join Sub Pop, which is a brand new label that started representing a lot of the Seattle bands, and because Kurt Cobain liked Mudhoney, they decided to join Sub Pop to be in the same record label as them. But the only other connection that I really found was that Kurt Cobain was a big fan of Soundgarden as well. But he was quoted as saying that like the only one of the Seattle bands that he really liked was Soundgarden. That was the only one that he actually was a fan of. So not really a fan of like the other guys that were going on at the time. But Nirvana is actually the next band that we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, so Nirvana was formed in 1987 in Aberdeen, Washington, where they're from, which I'm assuming is pretty close to Seattle. So it was formed by Kurt Cobain, obviously lead singer and guitarist, Chris Novoselic, who was the bassist, and the drummer, Chad Channing. That was their original drummer.
What a Chad.
And from all reports, he was a Chad.
Didn't fit with the beta sound.
Yeah, well, he did eventually. So they recorded Bleach with him, the first album, and then when you have such a Chad like Chad with such a beta like Kurt Cobain, like it's gonna clash. So Chad ended up leaving after that, and they later found their drummer, their most famous drummer, Dave Grohl, who would later go on to form Foo Fighters, and is famous in his own right.
Dave Grohl was interesting. He wasn't like, I guess he was fitting for Nirvana because he wasn't really attached to the Seattle scene. He came from the DC scene.
Yeah, DC hardcore.
And like later on, most of the people he worked with were like not really like the rest of the Seattle guys. He had like more of the widespread alternative rock connections.
Yeah, when they found him, he was in a hardcore band called Scream, and they actually saw him play, and they were impressed by his drumming. But he was already in a band. They were looking for a drummer, and apparently Scream just broke up like a few months later. So he got into contact with them because he knew that they were looking for a drummer, and then that's how they formed. That's how he joined the band. So, like we were saying, Nirvana was on Sub Pop when they recorded Bleach, but they actually, I thought Nevermind was released on Sub Pop, but apparently it wasn't.
No, it was I think initial sessions were led by Sub Pop. Like Sub Pop actually was the first one to connect them with Butch Vig, which was the producer for the album. And they recorded some sessions, but they decided to, nah. And like, they wanted to change labels. I forget exactly why they changed labels, but they maybe wanted to distance themselves from grunge, or
what they said is that they wanted a label that would actually like can afford to push them into more of a because Sub Pop was an indie label. Like we think of Sub Pop now as like this big thing.
Yeah, no, Sub Pop right now is
like, the time,
like a monster in indie rock,
but back then they were just starting. Like they had just started in the 80s, and they just had these grunge bands nobody knew about really.
Yeah.
So they didn't really have the money to push. I think their first album, Bleach, was recorded for like $600 because that's what they had.
Yeah, it was pretty cheap. I mean, whatever they could afford basically is whatever they could.
So they actually signed to a major label, DGC.
Is one of the Geffen labels.
David Geffen.
He's put up several labels over the years, and yeah, that's just one of them.
But they were able to give that push and that money behind it, money for marketing and stuff, money for all that shit. And, that's probably a big reason why Nirvana is the biggest band, the biggest grunge band, one of the biggest bands of all time.
Yeah, well, they got a big push out of the gates with them. There's other factors. I guess we can get into it.
It's one of the reasons. But yeah, Nevermind was released on DGC in 1991. They released their single, Smells Like Teen Spirit, and got massive breakthrough success, became one of the biggest bands. Kurt Cobain became an icon.
It felt, from accounts, it says, like, people say that it felt like it was overnight. I wonder how like, overnight it actually was. They got to, like, the album, I think, got to number 1 on the Billboard charts at the start of 1992.
Mm-hmm. And it was released in 1991. I don't know when in 1991.
Yeah, I'm going to assume sometime in the middle of it.
Because Smells Like Teen Spirit, I'm assuming, was the first single. I think it was at least.
Oh, was it? I didn't look into that. But... yeah, like Smells Like Teen Spirit at the very least is the one that like broke through. It had that music video that like people saw and kind of captivated.
Yeah,
like, the ethos of it.
And it's kind of hard to with songs like Smells Like Teen Spirit that are just ingrained in your memory from having it. Like I was born in 1994. You were born in 1992. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I mean. So this was released in 1991. This is so big, like you hear it 8 million times in just your life. I grew up, that song's just in the background, it's just a song. So it's kind of hard to judge it as just a song because it's just like a part of your life at that point.
It is a bit hard to like kind of distance yourself a little bit. But I don't know, I like these days I don't listen to Nirvana quite as constantly as I did back in high school. So like whenever I do listen back, it almost is as though I have like slightly fresh ears. I'm like, okay.
So what do you think of Smells Like Teen Spirit? Do you think it deserves like the acclaim that it got? Do you think it was like or was it like a fluke?
I'm going to have my hot take on this. Hot take.
Oh shit, David's hot takes.
It's not even that controversial. But no, I think Smells Like Teen Spirit was a massive unexpected breakthrough. Because if you kind of look through what was going on in the 80s, especially the late 80s, hair metal was kind of slow to evolve. It had some sort of evolution with like Guns N' Roses. They were bringing more of a raw sound. and that made it a little bit easier for some bands to transition into that sound, like Jane's Addiction. And you kind of expected the next thing would be a band like Mother Love Bone, who like had the lead singer not died, but also at the same time that Nirvana was putting this album out, Pearl Jam was putting out their album 10, which was based more on. We'll talk more about Pearl Jam in a bit, but it's based more on classic rock, and the way it was produced, it also like melded a little bit better with the LA sound of the time. And if you were to think about logically or like more of a smooth transition, it would make sense for things to kind of like go in that order. How go from like Guns N' Roses, Jane's Addiction, Pearl Jam, and like have those kind of sounds dominate early on. But Nirvana was a band that like did not sound like the rest of the Seattle scene. They had a lot of, and I'll talk more about them now, but they had a lot of indie rock influences in them. Yeah. And indie rock, that was not a sound that was ready to break through in the same way that like alternative rock was about to break through. But Nirvana kind of pushed it out of the gates with this album. It kind of rode along.
Yeah. Well, because they fused it with that grunge sound, with that alternative rock sound.
Yeah.
And it's basically like indie rock songwriting with like more of an alternative rock sound.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
But also there's like a lot of like that whole, people talk about the soft loud dynamics of Nirvana. Yeah. Which, is something that the Pixies did. Yeah. But maybe more importantly is the fact that a lot of Nirvana's melodies are driven by the bass and not the guitar. And that's also something that was like just very different from a lot of the other bands at the time. So they kind of just pushed out of the gates this sound that was really ahead of his time in terms of like what popularity was. I mean, this is an album that by all accounts should have remained in the underground, but it just broke through directly into the mainstream. And I don't know, it took rock, at least in my opinion, ahead by several years.
What was your hot take about Smells Like Teen Spirit?
I mean, if you want a hot take from that, it's not my favorite song on the album. I don't think it's the best song.
Yeah, I don't.
But that's not to like really shit on it or anything.
Yeah, I think it's a good song, but
it's the one that people heard first. Like, yeah.
And I think if it wasn't like so ingrained in my mind, I'd probably like it more. But just since it's such a since you just hear it so often, it just becomes like nothing to you. Like you can't. Like I wish I could hear it with fresh ears. Like if I heard it in 1991 or 1992, like whenever it was breaking out. Because to me, it just sounds like rock radio. Like you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, these days it's hard to kind of like think about that song. It also was like, I in a lot of ways I came from. So I moved to the United States when I was like 9 years old. Not that really makes too much of a difference, but at some point people really hyped up how important this song was. Yeah, I hadn't heard it at that point, and I don't know why I hadn't heard it. I had heard some of the other Nirvana songs, but like people were like, "Oh, you haven't heard Smells Like Teen Spirit?" And
I don't know how it's possible you would have heard other ones and not Smells Like Teen Spirit.
I'm not sure. My listening was very much guided by the radio. What the radio was playing. Yeah. And maybe just the DJs in that station like were just tired of Smells Like Teen Spirit. So they were just playing like, I don't know, they were playing Dumb and Come As You Are, Lithium, and they were just passing on. Or maybe I just didn't catch whenever they played Smells Like Teen Spirit. And somebody played it for me, and I don't know, compared to the other songs that I had heard from them, I thought it was a little bit maybe like slightly underwhelming compared to like how much it was amped up. You know what I mean? Yeah. But I still think it's a fun song.
It's a good song. It's a fun song. It's not the best one on the album, but let's talk about the album. Spending too much time on Smells Like Teen Spirit. So I think, first of all, the first like half of this album is like all hits.
Yeah, the first half is all killer.
Yeah.
I mean, I was writing through all these songs I love. Smells Like Teen Spirit, In Bloom, which kind of has like a. He kind of mentioned that he wanted to make this album sound like the Knack was being fucked by Black Sabbath and Black Flag, and you kind of hear it. You know, like there's a lot of power pop in this.
There's a lot of pop songwriting. There's a lot of indie rock songwriting. Like you can hear that Kurt Cobain more than anybody else had a knack for like pop songwriting. Yeah, and like that's why I think Nirvana got so popular, because it was in that grunge aesthetic, but they were pop songs at the core.
Yeah, and I mean they also had a wider set of influences. We talked about the Pixies, but like a song like "Come As You Are" kind of reminds me a little bit of like REM in a sense.
Yeah,
and there's one particular one. They had a cover of "Love Buzz" in a previous album with a Shocking Blue song. They're a band from the 60s. And that sound comes back again in the song "Lounge Act" later on in the album.
That's one of the songs that I really don't like. I think that's really the only song that I don't like on the album.
Oh, you weren't a fan of that one?
Like, I just... Like, it's just, like, annoying to me.
I like that one. I think it's, I like the fact that it's a little different.
And I like the fact that it's different, and I can listen to it when I listen to the album, but I would never choose to listen to that song. Like, I want to listen to Lounge Act right now. It's just, like, And I get why, like, I get the thing, like, they called it Lounge Act. It sounds like a lounge song type of... It's just, like, I don't know. It's cheesy. I don't like it much. Even though I do like the part at the end where you, like, start screaming and shit, and it gets more... Because it does build up where it starts in that lounge area, and then he starts, like, screaming more at the end and getting more... Yeah.
Well, I don't know about cheesy. I don't know. I really like the bass line on there, but... I don't know. The one I actually did not like, and actually is probably the only song I specifically did not like out of all the stuff I listened to, was the hidden track at the end of the album.
Oh yeah, that's another one that I don't. It's
Endless
just,
Nameless.
I like how aggressive it is, and I like the sound of it, but like I don't need 6 minutes of it.
Yeah, I don't want to listen. Really... I'm not trying to listen to Big Black over here. I'm just trying to listen to
Yeah.
If I wanted to,
I'm kind of trying to listen to Big Black though. So.
Yeah. So I mean, Nirvana. I mean, they were also like, I don't know, they had a lot of Sonic Youth in there as well.
Yeah.
And that's not something that you saw from like a lot of other bands at the time. Nirvana was the reason a lot of these bands broke through, not just the Seattle bands, but a lot of these like otherwise underground alternative rock bands like Sonic Youth.
Yeah, they really opened the door for underground music, weirder music, because
everybody got
because Nirvana got successful like out of the blue seemingly, so major labels were willing to take a chance on weird bands, because before that, I mean, Nirvana, like if you listen to Bleach, it's not like super accessible. I mean, it's more accessible than maybe the other grunge stuff, but it's still,
but I wouldn't call it it's not a super accessible album.
Yeah.
And actually the accessibility of this album, I would put it mostly on Butch Vig, which is the producer. Butch Vig said that he had to trick Kurt Cobain to do overdubs, for instance. Sometimes
I heard that he would say like, "Oh, John Lennon used to do this a lot because he loves John Lennon."
Yeah,
so it'd be like, "Well, if John Lennon does
John Lennon does overdubs, I guess I could do overdubs." He not only did that, but also like he cleaned up the sound a lot, especially like those guitars. They don't sound fuzzy the way that Mudhoney does. It's like they have a much cleaner sound to it, and yeah, it's kind of strange because it doesn't sound like the brownness that you get from a lot of other grunge bands. It has more colors of like blue and green. I don't know if it's weird coming from talking about color theory.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know if other people listen to music like this. I didn't know you did either. But like, every time I listen to a song, I have a color associated with it. Like,
apparently, that's a thing that happens. It doesn't happen to me always, but like. There is a certain kind of mood that like I can associate certain colors with, and like this one has like it's much more playful, it's much more fun. It's surprisingly not that. I mean, some songs are downers, but like there's surprisingly
not a lot. There's not a lot of downer songs. It's a lot of like more fun stuff, more pop kind of stuff. There's like a couple downs, like Polly is a slow song, and I love Polly. And
I'm okay with Polly.
I like it a lot.
That one has like the meat puppets kind of like on its sleeves. It's like kind of like a slow, not really like hard, but like kind of a slow ballad from like a meat puppets. Yeah, cowpunk kind of stance.
And Something in the Way is the other like acoustic cut, which I also love.
I thought the strings were interesting, but I I think that song's whatever.
Something in the Way's a classic. What are you talking about? I love it because it just starts with that acoustic guitar, and it's like in this album that was mostly fun and stuff. It ends on such a downer note. I'm just gonna say it's the last song because fuck Endless Nameless.
Yeah.
And so it ends on such a downer note, and Kurt Cobain's like almost whispering in this tone, and it's not gonna be picked up on the mic.
Probably not.
But yeah, he's whispering and lyrics about like living like under a tent eating fish and stuff. It like sounds like he's homeless or something, and I love it when the strings come in. I think it's great. I think it's perfect.
It's a nice song, but it's, I don't know, I usually finish the album before that song comes on. So.
My God.
Yeah, I know it's a little bit of a rough thing to say, but I don't know. I like to end the album on like a higher note, especially like On a Plane. Which
On a
I
Plane
think
is great, yeah.
I mean, to me it sounds more like the Replacements or Husker Du, like kind of like more indie pop songwriting, like the Bastillines almost. That you like,
yeah,
but with like performed with like punk instruments. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I think my favorite song on this was actually Drain You.
Drain You, I really like that song actually.
I love that song.
I think that one's like I think
it's underrated. Like, people won't really talk about that song.
Right.
But
like,
I love it.
It wasn't one of the singles, but like I think that one's solid. Just as solid as Lithium, just as solid as Come As You Are and In Bloom. You know?
Yeah, and it has that cool breakdown in the middle where they're just like kind of like a noise breakdown where it's just like a drum beat and then there's like weird like whistling sound and
yeah, no, that one I think that one's like the most perfect description of like a power pop song being raped by Black Sabbath and Black Flag.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think it is mostly like album consists mostly of like, you know, those power pop type songs with like a grunge aesthetic, and it is broken up with some like kind of more punk leaning songs like Breed, Territorial Pissing, and I like those songs. I like those songs in general, and especially it like breaks up the album to like, you know, it has these more fun songs, and then you get a really aggressive punk rock song. I think this album. I think it's a great album. Obviously, I mean, not a hot take saying Nevermind is a great album.
You know, I think it's a good one.
It's all right, I guess.
No, I really like this one. I would say, you know, maybe over the years it's maybe fallen a little bit from like, I think I used to have it in my top 5. Lately, it's been in my top 10.
Like all time ever?
Yeah, it might slip into my top 20.
I don't know if I do that because I'm not really a huge fan of grunge in general. Like I like it, but it's not really my favorite shit. But I think this is one of the better.
I'm on another end. I grew up on grunge, so like
yeah. And I think this is one of the best. I mean, obviously, it's one of the best grunge albums. Probably the best grunge album to me.
Yeah. Yeah. But also like it just set the tone for the whole 90s alternative.
Yeah. And like, you know, were you choosing 5 albums to like represent different aspects of grunge, and this was like the mainstream mainstream breakthrough, like the breakthrough of the sound from like that underground sound to that mainstream sound is like what started it. But also and kind of like a good in between of both that mainstream sound and that.
But this is just bigger than grunge overall. It was like this album was just big. Like it, like I don't know. I can't. It was
I mean, yeah, Kurt Cobain became an icon. The whole 90s, and like the death of Kurt Cobain, it was like the death of grunge and like the death of a whole movement.
It's hard to pinpoint albums as important as this one.
Yeah.
Like. Yeah. Cause,
it kind of changed everything overnight.
The public had a reluctance to accept alternative rock, and this album just completely flipped that on its head. Hair metal died that day. Like it really did. Like Guns N' Roses.
Thank you for that, because hair metal can suck a dick.
Yeah. I mean, well, at the very least, it killed like bands like Poison. Guns N' Roses had a little bit more of like a sputtering out.
Well, Guns N' Roses was like huge, so.
Yeah. Plus, they were like kind of hair metal. They had the hair. But, like,
Guns N' Roses.
Yeah, but like the sound was really not that.
It was, yeah.
It wasn't Motley Crue, you know.
No.
It was something different. All right, cool. Anything else about this album?
No, I think it's great. Nirvana, if you haven't heard of them, listen to them. They're good.
Yeah. I did want to say, though, they were also a little different because, like, they you know, they have, like, a little bit of a few different personalities. Like, Dave Grohl was kind of an optimistic dude. He was just energetic and optimistic.
Oh yeah, we didn't even touch on the lyrics. We got to touch on that, like, because this kind of encapsulates a lot of grunge lyrics, at least the mood of grunge lyrics. Because like Mudhoney, like they have lyrics in their songs, obviously, but it's not like they don't really matter. You know, Kurt Cobain kind of like was like a poet or whatever. He tried to make his songs have meanings and shit.
Yeah.
So like, you know, grunge really focused on a lot of themes of like alienation, isolation. You know,
I hate my dad.
Sad boy shit, sad white boys.
Yeah. I like heroin.
Yeah, that's one of their favorite topics. Not so much Nirvana. I mean, he did. I'm pretty sure he did. But he didn't really write a lot of songs about heroin.
I think like if you look very closely, I don't know. Also, Kurt Cobain, I wouldn't like take his lyrics too seriously. A lot of these lyrics he wrote like at the last minute before he recorded.
Yeah, but they are more poetic than like a lot of other bands.
Yeah,
like I think so. Like, and I mean, he did like write a little bit of like storytelling kind of stuff on Polly, kind of the story of like a woman that was kidnapped and like raped.
Yeah. Also, Kurt Cobain was like surprisingly feminist for his time.
Yeah, he was very, very feminist.
Yeah. I have some like. I don't want to defame it. I don't know. I have my, I have my suspicions as to where Kurt Cobain would stand in today's.
Tell me.
Oh, I just don't like. I have like a suspicion that maybe he would embrace this whole like non-gender conforming idea.
Oh, okay. I thought you were gonna say he was like alt-right or something.
No.
Yeah, he'd probably be like.
I just think. I mean, he was definitely seemed like the least macho of like all the people.
Yeah, I mean, and it's. I mean, he might just be like a not very masculine man. I'm not a super masculine man.
But like, so. I mean, either way, I think he would be like all for this whole like. Yeah.
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, we can move on.
Yeah, and Chris Novoselic, I thought he was kind of like a. I don't know. He brought a little bit of a silliness too. Like,
I mean, all three of them are really silly. If you watch them in like interviews and stuff and things like that, a lot of them, like especially Chris Novoselic and Dave Grohl, were very like funny and they were silly and stuff. And Kurt Cobain too, to a certain extent. But you know, he had to play his like wounded boy thing. So
he kind of played the straight man a little bit, but with like funny glasses and like funny outfits. And stuff like that. All right, cool though. Now let's talk about a band that's not silly at all.
No, and when you talk about the themes of heroin, this was the heroin band. Their favorite subject. They should have just their album cover. Honestly, should have just been a dirty spoon and a needle for every album, because that's like the only thing they liked. I think
it's like heroin. The personification of the Tenderloin District, San Francisco. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but we're talking about Alice in Chains with the album Dirt, their breakthrough album that came out in 1992.
Yeah, we
thought that album was the one to pick for that year. And
yeah, we're also doing this kind of chronologically.
Yeah.
But so yeah, we chose Alice in Chains for this because they kind of they represent more of the grunge sound that leans more towards metal, like heavy metal sound.
But also like not only just heavy metal, like they were the most in touch with the hair metal as well.
Yeah,
they were like a more solid transition from.
I think that's why I have a hard time with Alice in Chains. I love Alice in Chains. I think in pieces, in parts, like
in parts and pieces.
I don't know, like I love a lot of their songs, but a lot of their songs I can't love fully because it has some of those aspects that I don't like that hair metal stuff. And
some of them do have a little bit of the hair metal, but like there's other. I mean, the Black Sabbath is still like painted all over this thing.
Oh yeah,
but they also like really like they very close to other metal bands like the thrash metal bands. Metallica, Slayer. Like at one point when they started recording this album is when the LA riots broke out.
Yeah.
And they took out Tom Araya from is that his name right?
Who? Which one?
From Slayer, the lead singer.
I don't know.
Okay. They took out the lead singer of Slayer out to the desert with them because they were like, hey, we gotta get the hell out of the city. And I mean that shows like a little bit of how the connection is. And Jeffrey Cantrell, who was the guitarist. At some point he moved to Dallas and he...
Was it Jeffrey or Jerry?
Jerry Cantrell. And he played with Pantera. While he was
I can see that.
Yeah.
But, Alice in Chains was formed in 1987. And it consists of Lane Staley on vocals, Jerry Cantrell on guitar, Mike Starr on bass, and Sean Kinney on drums. And I think they changed their lineup over the years.
Yeah, well, at the very beginning, it was just Lane Staley and some other dudes, and Jerry Cantrell. I don't know. For some reason, Lane Staley couldn't see the fact that like these guys wanted to play with him. Like these guys had to convince Jerry.
Yeah, I remember like they were trying to convince him to be like the singer in the band.
Yeah,
because I think didn't he play drums or something before? Or
I forget exactly what was. I think that like I think these guys wanted to form a band, and Lane Staley already had Alice in Chains, but I think like they just wanted to like be the frontman of the band. Like
yeah, and there was apparently they were trying out other vocalists, but they were purposely picking people that were bad at singing just to get him to say like, okay, I'll do it if there's nobody else that can do it.
Yeah, he broke when they had a male stripper. Performed the.
And he's like, this guy's not even singing; he's just taking off his clothes. Like I don't understand why everybody else
guys, is so bad. I can do a better job than this guy.
But I thought it was interesting because Alice in Chains was the name of a different band that he had formed, that Lane Staley had formed beforehand. And they were trying to pick a name for this new band, and they wanted to use Alice in Chains, so he had to call the old members of his old band. And ask for permission to use the name. And they were like, can't you just think of a different name? And he's like, no, man, I really want to use this one. And they're like, I guess, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, who cares, really?
Well, I would kind of care if I was in the old band and the new band became, like, huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, you couldn't, like, let me come back in and, like, play tambourine or something at least? Like, get some of that money?
No, I mean, whatever. I don't know. I'm like a no hard feelings kind of guy. I'm just like, okay, whatever, you guys. I mean, they probably knew that it was his band anyways. Like, yeah. But... All right, so this album, though, breaking it down, we already talked about a lot of
Dirt, released in 1992.
A lot of metal influences, but also it feels very country, very southern.
It kind of gives me a desert vibe a lot.
A desert vibe? Yeah. I can feel that too, yeah. And either way, it's a very American sound.
Yeah, it sounds very like...
And I would say grunge as a whole is a genre that was very American.
Well, it took influences from all American genres,
right?
Like, you know,
and like,
but I think specifically American genres, like
I think like other English, like the England and Australia.
Even though Black Sabbath is a huge influence, but
right. That aspect is like the one thing that's like, yeah, no, Black Sabbath is all over it, but I think the vocalization in particular, there's a lot of
deep voice,
the slurring of the words. Like that's something that's very, I feel like it's very American, and it's like
it does kind of sound like Southern in a way, but even though they're from Seattle,
well, I mean Jerry Cantrell, he said that he would describe himself as half Yankee, half redneck.
Oh really?
So, yeah, that's the way that he would describe. He grew up in a lot of country himself.
Oh yeah, and there's redneck people everywhere, like anywhere there's country,
right?
So
just go to like Spokane or not Spokane. What am I saying?
I don't know. I don't know anything about any place. I
think I am saying Spokane. Yeah, I don't know. The eastern part of those western states.
But also another interesting thing about Alice in Chains is that their instrumentation was interesting because like the way they played with a lot of different time signatures. A lot of their songs weren't really in like the standard 4/4 time signature. Like the first song on the album,
they didn't even catch on to that.
Well, yeah, I don't know. It's just something I noticed where like Them Bones, which I love. I think
that's one of the solid ones, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's my favorite. I don't know. There's a few that's my favorite.
There's a few.
But Them Bones are just so... And especially kicking the album off, it's just so good. And the riff is just so weird because it's kind of just like a da, 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 da. It's like... So kind of like... Just like monotonous, but still like really aggressive and hardcore. It's just so strange. And it's just, in the verse riff at least is in 7/8 time. Instead of like a straight 4/4.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I guess time signatures is kind of. I mean, in some other bands we'll see it more obviously, but like, yeah, no, time signatures are a thing. And this band is just kind of like a. Yeah, it has some like it has a lot of weird moments to it.
There's one song. What was that song? There's like a circus sounding transition.
For me, the song Godsmack really like
I hate that song.
And that one, I think, I mean, obviously, with a name like...
Is that what Godsmack...
That's what Godsmack is named after. And you hear that song, it really sounds like Godsmack. Like, that's what Godsmack based their sound off of.
Worst song on the album, in my opinion.
I mean, that's why some people really hate nu metal, right? Because, like, this is the kind of sound This band became very influential, but specifically in bands like Korn and like Godsmack and like a lot of the new metal that would come later. What was the one band the one song that sounded like Korn? Hate to Feel. I thought had like I was listening to the harmonies that they have, and like they have some like kind of a strange harmonization going on.
Well, yeah, that's the thing that Lane Staley and Jerry Cantrell did a lot, where they like a lot of times they would harmonize in like interesting ways and like sing harmonize, and it was really. I mean, that was a really interesting part about their sound was the singing. Well, because especially the lead singer, Lane Staley, has a strange voice to begin with. It's just so deep. And then, like, the harmonies that he does with Jerry Cantrell are also just make it even a little stranger, but it's, like, really, I don't know, intoxicating.
Right. Yeah, it has a kind of a weird, like, kind of entrancing sensation. But, like, a lot of these vocals, they have a lot of hook, they have a lot of catchiness. But the harmonies are done in such a way that they don't sound like the mainstream. You know what I mean? Like it still has that, like it still lures you in the way that the mainstream melodies do. Yeah. But they're performed in such a way that it doesn't feel like, I don't know, I guess to use like an old term, like, you know, that gay pop that is on the radio. It sounded more rough and aggressive and
like a leather bar kind of
like a what?
Like you're in a leather bar.
Like you're in a leather bar.
Not like that gay pop on the radio. I'm tough. I'm in Judas Priest. I'm totally straight.
Yeah, but I mean, like, yeah, it didn't sound like George Michael. It sounded more like, I guess Judas Priest. Yeah,
but just some like highlights for me. Them Bones, obviously. I mean, it's probably my favorite song on there. Or The Rooster.
The Rooster, like, I think, is a good one.
The Rooster was like really a part of my childhood. Like that song specifically, I remember I had like the greatest hits album of Alice in Chains that I used to listen to a lot. But The Rooster was was that from you?
Yeah, I was the one who got that. Yeah,
obviously, I got Toxicity from you too. I think. Yeah. Like I got a lot of shit from you, but yeah, The Rooster was like, and I was like 10, and this song just like was my favorite thing.
That's so funny. I can't imagine a 10-year-old listening to Alice in Chains.
I loved it. I love the Alice in Chains, but specifically The Rooster. Like that shit was my shit. And it's about a guy like who went to Vietnam and like got scarred from war in Vietnam.
It's about his dad.
Yeah, his dad. Yeah. Who was in Vietnam. But like he goes to war and then comes back. And like, you know, the whole Vietnam thing where the soldiers came back and they were like, people hated them because of what they did. I mean, what a lot of them did was terrible, but you know, not all of them.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. It's hard to really like blame the soldiers for like what happened.
Yeah, I mean, some of the soldiers were terrible, but some of them were most of them were just doing what they were told to do. It was a draft. Yeah. So, you know, most of them didn't even want to go. So it's hard to blame the soldiers, but this is a whole Vietnam discussion, whatever. Right. But like just that kind of, you know, and it's so down tempo and I love it. I just love it. Just the vocals on it are great. The bass line and like the guitar, it's kind of atmospheric and stuff. And like the guitar line comes, at least during the verses, there's just like guitar lines that come in at perfect times to just like punctuate his singing, and then it just explodes into the chorus.
Yeah, it builds and builds and builds, and it's just bombastic. I don't know how this band just does it. They're not a band that you think will be that popular, but they really do make their music. Like.
And I think bombastic is they don't sound like that at first, but like there's a lot of parts of the singing, especially that's like bombastic and like kind of theatrical in a way.
Yeah, a bit theatrical. There's a lot of catharsis in a lot of the songs. He just like, I don't know, he kind of unleashes, Lane Staley really unleashes his vocals. Yeah. Like, but that song I thought was fantastic, as well as Wood, I think is the other one
the other classic on the, like, Them Bones, Rooster,
that one's about Andrew Wood, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the Mother Love Bone guy.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Another heroin connection.
And, but that's an example of how they have some Middle Eastern influences.
Yeah, that song, and what was the other song that had a really
Dirt? I thought.
Yeah, Dirt that had that really like Middle Eastern riff to it.
Yeah, and
but yeah,
I thought that also like in terms of influences, I thought Wood, the chorus sounded a little bit like Heart to me, the band Heart. I don't know. It just seemed more like a classic rock.
I'd have to listen to it again.
Yeah. And then, I mean, my other favorite, I think, between Rooster Wood, my other favorite is Not in the Hole.
I don't like Down in a Hole.
You don't like Down in the Hole?
It's like a weird ballad, and like the vocals on it. It first of all, it starts with this like weird clean guitar thing that I hate, and like the very beginning intro thing, and it just sounds like an '80s ballad to me.
I mean, it kind of is,
and I hate that. Like it just sounds like an '80s hair metal ballad, and these are these like hair metal influences. Like they have like small hair metal influence.
Yeah. And there's some moments that sound like Motley Crue.
Hair metal. I don't like it at all. So like hearing this is just like, oh my god, what is this?
Well, like I mean, if you listen closely, the drums on this entire album are hair metal drums. They're all
that's the thing.
toms.
Like I don't like the drums on this album either.
They're big, bombastic. They're supposed to like fill a stadium, and this is the kind of band that like is supposed to be a transitional band between like, the hair metal and like.
And that's the thing. Like that's why it's weird. Alice in Chains is a weird band for me because I love a lot of stuff about them, like specifically like the guitar playing, the weird like songwriting they do with like the weird time signatures and stuff like that, the weird riffs they do, the singing, like the voice, Lane Staley's voice in particular is like really captivating and stuff. But then they have those things like the bombastic drums and stuff, these hair metal influences that really like just take me out of it.
I get it. I mean, what it kind of does it for me is that like, I think this band shines in a few songs. Like, just, like, more than I ever expected from this kind of band. But then some other songs, like, I don't know, maybe even lyrically, like, they kind of seem kind of stale, almost. Like, they...
Stale in that they only write about heroin?
Yeah, I guess they only write about heroin, or, like, they... I don't know, their rhyming is not, like, the best, or the lyrics themselves seem a little slightly cheesy, but only, like, in a few moments, like, I don't know. It seems like there's like this album could have benefited from maybe like cutting out a few songs, and like it's
definitely. It's also this like
it's a little long. It's like
the other albums that we talked about were like 40 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever. Yeah. This one's like over an hour, and it could have definitely been cut down. There were songs that you could cut down. Godsmack doesn't need to be in there.
But then how would we have new metal?
Godsmack doesn't need to be in there.
Yeah, but that's I don't know. That's for me is Alice in Chains.
Yeah, they have a really interesting sound that I like a lot. In like their best songs are amazing, but they have a lot of those influences I don't like.
Yeah, it's the metal connection. I would say the hair metal connection to grunge, and they actually had that big single. Man in the Box.
Yeah,
that was.
I used to love that shit.
That kind of like was starting to break before Nirvana broke through. So like. They were like the preamble, I would say, for grunge.
Yeah.
All right. Next album is from a band that maybe got a lot of shit from the beginning because a lot of people thought that they were like a corporate put together, but it's only because they had gone through like 3 different iterations.
Yeah, it's just that those 2 guys. What were their names again?
Stone Gossard and Jeff Ament.
They were just very enterprising people, and
They
just wanted to have a successful band no matter what.
They tried so hard. No matter how hard they tried.
They tried so hard and got so far. But in the end, it did matter.
It did matter, actually. They went through Green River. They went through Mother Love Bone. And, there's
two important and influential bands in their own right.
Right. And then they went to Pearl Jam. But right as soon as they were starting with Pearl Jam, they had that little project with Chris Cornell, the Temple of the Dog. Which afterwards became very popular. But it was just kind of like that was more of like our best friend died. Let's make an album about it kind of album.
Yeah.
But yeah, they got this guy, Eddie Vedder, to be the vocalist for Pearl Jam. And this guy comes from San Diego. He's not even from Seattle.
Yeah, it's funny because apparently like at the time he was just like working at a gas station part-time basically. And I think he was in another band at the time or had just gotten out of a band.
They were all in different bands,
Yeah. And like I think it just sounded like the douchiest thing to me because like I was reading up on it and apparently like he said like here's some songs, see if you can write something to it, and he said like like he went to go surfing and like listen to it on the way or something.
I think That's the thing with Eddie Vedder. He comes off as douchey at first, but then you look a little more deeply, and like I'm sure he was like, I can imagine him surfing as a way to like reconcile with his inner self.
Yeah, like, definitely.
Eddie Vedder turns out to be like a very spiritual kind of guy. I don't know. You hear it a lot in his music as well.
He's really into like charity and different like activist organizations and stuff like that.
Yeah, that he is. Yeah, he's an all around good guy. I would say he's like he's like that meme, the good guy, the one who has like that like cigar in his mouth. You know what I'm talking about?
No idea.
Okay. But we instead of talking about their breakthrough album 10, which came out in 1991, because 10 has some weird production on it. I don't know. I don't like the production that was done on that album, and I don't think the band liked it either. Because they said that when they went into produce to create Versus, which is their second album, they got this other producer called Brendan O'Brien, and they said they wished their first album sounded like this album, is basically what they said.
And I haven't listened to 10, but 10 had their biggest singles.
The huge anthems.
So what were they?
They had Even Flow. They had Alive. They had
Jeremy.
Once. Jeremy. They
like
have
literally,
Black.
Literally any, like, when you think of Pearl Jam, you think of one of those songs.
Like, yeah, these are like songs that like get the entire crowd singing along.
And this was released in 91, I think.
91,
right?
the same time as Nevermind.
So 91 was really the breakout year for grunge.
Right. And like if Nevermind wouldn't have broken through, 10 would have broken through for sure. These were inescapable songs. I mean, they were catchy as hell.
And this is like, I guess my hot take, but is Pearl Jam even grunge?
That's been up for debate for a while.
Because they do not sound like grunge to me at all.
It's well, at least especially on this album, I feel like by that, I think that Pearl Jam was one of the first bands to start snipping the influence lines that started grunge. Their sound is not heavily based on Black Sabbath. It's not heavily based on Black Flag. You could say that maybe they have a lot more Led Zeppelin in them. Yeah, and
a lot. They sound like the Who to me a lot.
They do have a lot of. I mean, that's Eddie Vedder's favorite band is the Who.
Yeah,
and
I get a lot of that from Eddie Vedder. Honestly,
yeah.
Like I think
Eddie Vedder
he sings
bring
with the same kind of like spirit that like what's his name does. Roger
Daltrey.
Yeah, he kind of like.
Yeah, I did hear
like
that.
Kindred spirits a little bit.
Yeah, not so much the instrumentation, but like the way he sings does have a lot of that. Like Behind Blue Eyes and like, all those
yeah,
things.
it's like I don't know. Roger Daltrey has an aspect of like the sensitive man, but like will still fight you.
Yeah,
that's what I get from Eddie Vedder.
Yeah, that's I can definitely see that. Yeah.
Like I'll fucking knock you out, but I'm gonna cry about it later.
I'm such a bad man. I'm the sad.
You don't know what's behind my blue eyes. You want to fucking find out?
Eddie Vedder would fight you though.
He would.
Don't get that twisted. But this band is Pearl Jam is very different from the. I mean, just in the same way that like Nirvana is very different from like.
Yeah, but Nirvana still had that. They still had a grunge sound. Like they.
I would say Pearl Jam does too, but like in a different way. I don't think they even do.
Like I think because I think for grunge, at least from what I'm hearing, I think an essential for grunge is to have like just a smidge of heaviness to it, like a smidge of distortion to your shit, like some of that heavy metal punk influence. Like you don't have to go all the way Alice in Chains with it, you gotta have that distortion to it. You gotta have that heaviness to it.
Yeah, I mean they did get a lot of slack because of that reason, and also Pearl Jam is the band that like a lot of post grunge is based on, because post grunge is like if you took grunge and just like forgot the fact that it ever had anything to do with the hardcore punk scene or Black Sabbath or anything like that. It's like taking like the ethos or like the things that make grunge kind of catchy, or like the particulars about grunge, but like not having any connection to the roots of it.
Yeah.
So,
so why are we covering Versus? Because you had like a specific reason for covering Versus instead of 10.
So Versus at this time in 1993, some of these bands were experiencing a backlash to the grunge popularity. Specifically, Nirvana and Pearl Jam were the ones that were experiencing this backlash.
The biggest bands, yeah.
The biggest bands. Nirvana, they never wanted to be popular, I think. But with Pearl Jam, it was slightly different. Pearl Jam wanted to take their music directly to the fans. They wanted to have big shows, but they didn't want to have they wanted people that actually liked them to be on there. They didn't want to play along with some of this pop mainstream things. Like, for instance, they made a video for Jeremy, and they decided to not make any videos after that, or at least like very few videos, because they didn't want people to associate their music with the music videos. They wanted people to like, they kind of wanted to be more like their classic rock bands. Like, they wanted people to like sit down in the basement, listen to the lyric, listen to the songs in their speakers. They wanted people to go to the concerts. They didn't want having to deal with like Ticketmaster, for instance. They had a big feud with Ticketmaster, and they wanted to put out one album every single year. They wanted to like just be like the Who, and they were tired of the fact that like at least like the mainstream, like the way the machine worked at that time was not like that. It was like have an album every 2 or 3 years, and pick out the singles, craft the sound. And so with Versus, it was a very much like, okay, no, we're gonna not do this whole anthemic thing that we were doing in our first album. I think there's only one song on here that I will count as actually anthemic, and that's Rearview Mirror. But they tried out everything else. Like there's some ballads, some tender ballads. They did more songs that were more close to like the hardcore from the original scene. And they started having a little bit more experimentation. There's a few songs that have more like tribal percussion, and this album kind of encapsulates a band that is rejecting this all out popularity, and like exploring and like kind of crafting their own following. They're like, we don't care about everybody anymore. It's only us. It's people.
Like them realizing like they got that huge fame and they realize like what comes with it and they don't really want it. They're gonna do things their own way. Like Nirvana kind of did the same thing with In Utero. Kind of
Yeah, they were just like, fuck this. We're gonna go work with Big Black and come back with like but.
Every time you mention Big Black, you have like a disdain. Do you hate Steve Albini?
I don't like Steve Albini, no.
Oh yeah, he told me that before. You're insane.
Steve Albini is also a dick. Have you ever like heard some of the things that people have said about Steve Albini?
About him? I don't know, but I've listened to Big Black and Shellac, and he sounds like he would be a dick.
Yeah.
What did they say about him?
No, he's just an ass. Like when you're like recording with him and stuff. Like when he's just very like. He's very rude. He like told Nirvana that like their first album sounded like Motley Crue, and like
who gives a shit? Like I thought you were gonna say he was a rapist or something. Which like,
well, I don't know. Well,
don't throw that out.
I don't know.
If he's just a dick to
people, reel it back. We're not making any accusations over here.
I don't know. Look, I don't know if he's a rapist, but I wouldn't be surprised.
But he does have an album called Songs About Fucking, and like
he has a band also called Rape Man.
Yeah.
So
I'm not saying he's about rape, but he does stuff.
He sure
about
talks
rape.
about it.
Yeah. This isn't about Steve Albini though. This is about Pearl Jam, and I think Brendan O'Brien. This sound that he made over here solidified the sound of Pearl Jam, and I think also took a step into what 90s alternative would be.
So,
what do you think about it?
I like this album a lot. I really like, and it's funny, I've never listened to Pearl Jam before this. I had no interest in Pearl Jam ever. Like, the shit I heard from, like, Jeremy or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, it's cool, I guess, but I really have no interest in listening to this ever. But I think Versus was the perfect album, Pearl Jam album, to get me into them, because...
Yeah. No, this is my favorite album from them. And I guess I kind of figured that you would like it more. You probably, at least production-wise, you probably wouldn't like 10. No, at least
I'm not really into that like anthemic sound, really. But yeah, this kind of has like more of a more raw sound that I would think from like Pearl Jam.
Yeah.
And I don't know, some songs that I really liked. I love Daughter. Daughter might be my favorite one on here.
Daughter is great.
And
Um, that Daughter I think is where like these ballads is really where a lot of the classic rock really comes up.
Yeah.
It kind of sounds like a ballad that like the Allman Brothers would do, or like Neil Young would do, maybe even Led Zeppelin. But it has like a little bit of that grunge rhythm going on.
Yeah.
Like it's not a fully soft song. It's like a soft song with like a little bit of energy behind it.
Yeah. And it's just another thing about Eddie Vedder that was really interesting is like I think he's actually a great songwriter. Like he's a great storyteller.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
Like all these songs have stories to them. Like in Daughter, at least from what I can tell, it's like about a girl who maybe has like a learning disability or something, and she's trying to like, I guess she feels like less than because her mother's trying to teach her things and she can't learn, and she's like feels ashamed of herself for not being able to learn.
Yeah. That's really nice. I don't know. It's like I don't know. Like Eddie Vedder did kind of like bring to the front like this more like socially conscious songwriting.
Yeah, I'm like like for my perception of Eddie Vedder is like completely wrong. Like honestly, I thought he was like a dick. I don't know.
No.
Like I didn't know anything about him or Pearl Jam.
Pearl Jam is such a great band. I don't know. So like I think like Kurt Cobain hated on Pearl Jam initially because he thought that they were like corporate sellouts or whatever. But before he died, like Kurt Cobain was like cool with Pearl Jam. I don't know. He was like, yeah, you guys are okay.
I think Pearl Jam is kind of maligned by a lot of people.
Yeah,
like
I think so
they're
too.
looked at as kind of like they're just like that pop shit or whatever, like that stupid. Like just shit. It was cool in the 90s, I guess, but it's not really that great.
But you know what? Pearl Jam don't care. Pearl Jam did that thing where like they have like their own crowd.
Yeah, it's like they got their core fan base.
It's like the Deadheads for Grateful Dead. Like,
yeah,
they have
people
like,
hate Grateful Dead, but
yeah,
but
like they don't care.
Yeah,
like,
it's like
they have like so many fans.
Yeah, it's like I don't care if there's people who hate us. Look at all these.
They're like a family over there. Like,
yeah, like the Juggalos.
Yeah, like the Juggalos. They don't care.
Pearl Jam are the Juggalos of grunge.
I prefer the Grateful Dead of grunge, but yes,
I prefer the Juggalos of grunge. They're exactly like ICP.
They even paint their faces. They don't paint their faces.
But yeah, some other highlights. I really like "Go," the first song on the album.
Go's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, it has. It's. I think it's a great opening. That fast guitar riff, like fast guitar lines, and it's a great like energetic opening.
It's definitely a statement of what they're trying to go for. Very bass driven as well.
It's more punkish than like a lot of the song, and that's so like I was saying, this isn't a grunge album to me.
It's hard to call it a grunge album.
It has some punk elements, but like for like 2 songs. Yeah. It's not. It's barely, and there's like not even anything heavy about this album. It just sounds like a classic rock album.
It's like a classic rock album for the 90s.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still 90s alternative. Like I don't know if you can take that away from that. But
yeah. Well, it's somewhere in between, like, because it doesn't really sound like, it doesn't have the sound of like an alternative rock album from the 90s. I don't think like.
Well, it sounds more like other alternative, like maybe alternative rock that you might not like. Like it's definitely more alternative rock than like the Spin Doctors, I would say.
Yeah. It's not like the pure pop or whatever.
But like they were like somewhere between the Nirvana sound and I don't know, fucking like Matchbox 20 and Hootie and the Blowfish, like.
Yeah, there's somewhere in between there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't call this a grunge album, but I still love it. Well, a really interesting song on there was Blood. Like, I really love that song.
It's got that funk bass and guitar.
It's got like a funk guitar line. It's got like a funk guitar riff in it, but like it sounds like a guitar that would be like the intro of a cop show. Like the verse sounds like the intro of a cop show or something.
Yeah. I get what you're saying.
And I love Eddie Vedder screaming his ass off on that song. I love his performance on that song.
How'd you feel about Dissident?
I like Dissident. I mean, it wasn't one that really stood out that much to me, but I liked it. I don't really think there's a bad song on here.
No, I wouldn't say so. I mean, but Dissident though like reminded me of like an Aerosmith type song. I don't know if you got that or not.
I'm not a huge fan of Aerosmith, so I probably wouldn't.
I'm also a fan of Aerosmith, so there's that. I don't know. I mean, the thing about Pearl Jam for me, I think, is it brings a lot of people that I like into the mix.
Yeah.
Like the vocals that Eddie Vedder has. You say that it kind of reminds you of Roger Daltrey. To me, it kind of reminds me of like Bruce Springsteen a little bit.
Yeah.
Of like Robert Plant in some, but like not in the same register. But like, some people say Jim Morrison.
Maybe, I don't know. He just seems like I don't know. He has like a hearty voice or something.
He does, yeah.
It's I don't know. It sounds American too as well.
Yeah.
It sounds like an American, like Bruce Springsteen. I think is a great example
Yeah.
because they're very similar. I think voice.
Yeah, and like even like songwriting wise, I think they're
because Bruce Springsteen
similar.
also did that like storytelling songwriting.
And like very few rock artists are gonna write a song about gun control like they did.
That's another Glorified G is kind of
that one I thought was interesting.
that I'm on the fence on that one.
Yeah,
because it's like so much anti-gun that it's
a little bit.
It's like preachy.
It's a little
But
preachy.
the story behind it, I think, is hilarious. Because do you know what the story behind it is?
Yeah, that like one of the guys bought
the
guns?
drummer bought 2 guns, and he was like telling like the other members of the band. He didn't tell what's his name, Eddie Vedder.
Yeah,
he told the other 2. He's like, oh hey, I just bought a couple guns, like, and just talking about, just chit chatting, and they're like, oh cool, and like then they got back to practice. And they're just like, they just told Eddie, like, oh yeah, what's his name just bought a gun. And Eddie Vedder lost his fucking mind. He's like, what? You bought a gun? Like, he's like, you bought a gun? And he's like, actually, I bought 2 guns. and that's actually
in case the first one goes bad.
Yeah, and that's actually the first line of the song. Eddie Vedder said something like, oh, I just bought a gun. Like, oh, you bought a gun? It's like, actually, I bought 2. Like, that's the first line of the song.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I never caught that. It's kind of funny. I don't know. Yeah, it's a little preachy, but it also reminds me of like REM, but like from that era of like Stan and Orange Scratch.
Yeah. It does kind of have that sound,
which I thought was kind of. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of different sounds in this album, but that one in particular.
But yeah, but like that actual song, I mean, it's not one of my favorites. It might be my least favorite actually on the album.
I think so too. It's not one of the ones that I like the most. There's a lot of other songs that I like more. I mean, I mentioned Rearview Mirror before. Rearview
Mirror, I love that song.
It's like that's like the anthem of the song of this album, and it just builds and builds and builds and builds and builds and builds, and like it reminds me of some of the earlier songs they had, like for the movie Singles. We haven't even talked about that movie. It's made by Cameron Crowe, and like every grunge band was part of that. Like,
yeah, I feel like there's a lot of I feel like maybe not every genre, but a lot of genres of movies have genres of music have like a movie that encapsulates that genre, or at least use a lot of those songs from that genre to like as a soundtrack, and it becomes like the movie of that genre. Yeah. So like for grunge it was Singles.
Yeah, and like later on there was like Empire Records, I think, was another one that kind of had like a. But yeah, I haven't even seen Singles. I gotta maybe watch it at some point, but I never even hear about it, like from movie people. But yeah, for Singles, they made the song "State of Love and Trust" and also "Breath," which are some of my favorite songs from Pearl Jam. They're not on any album, but like they're. Yeah, was
that around this time or?
Yeah, it was right before this album. Rearview Mirror, I think, encapsulates that same energy as those songs.
Okay, I should listen to those then.
Yeah, and they were also produced by Brendan O'Brien, so it's got the good production. But
so would you say Brendan O'Brien is like the like grunge producer, or like?
No, because they were each of these albums has a different producer. We talked about Butch Vig. For Nirvana.
What else was Brendan O'Brien on? He was on some other grunge album, wasn't he?
He did do some other stuff. I know he mixed Soundgarden's Superunknown. Mm-hmm. He wasn't the producer, but he mixed it. And Brendan O'Brien was on Rage Against the Machine.
It wasn't.
He was a producer for that.
So he just did a lot of 90s rock
He did
stuff.
a lot of 90s rock stuff. And, because, I mean, the guy who did Dirt, Dave Jordan, he also contributed to that sound of the 90s.
Yeah.
But Brendan O'Brien, something that I've noticed immediately is that the drums changed. There's not toms driven anymore. Over here is very snare and cymbal driven, which I think is more 90s alternative as opposed to like, the 80s hair metal kind of thing. But like I don't know, this album has some great songs. Elderly Woman Behind a Counter, similar to Daughter, I thought was pretty good. I liked some of the other hard rock. Some of the other harder hitting songs like Leash. Mm-hmm. We talked about Blood. Rats is interesting, I guess.
I like Rats.
Yeah,
I think it has a really good like bass line and groove to it.
Yeah,
and it's another song that's like different, like pretty different. Like also like Blood, where it doesn't. Blood and Rats are like pretty unique in the album. Like,
and like they don't really come back to that sound too much in later albums either. It was just kind of like very much like a one-off kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I mentioned is maybe Indifference. They have like a spiritual jam going on there.
Yeah.
And like, some of these things remind me of like maybe a little bit of Led Zeppelin, but like more of like people like Van Morrison. And I know these jams, 10 has a lot of these spiritual jams as well.
It really sounds like I would hate 10.
Like people who go to these concerts though, they like get really into it. It's like a spiritual experience for them almost. I don't know. Yeah, like if you ever listen to like Astral Weeks by Van Morrison, it kind of has the same vibe going on, where it's just like you kind of get lost into the sound, and like they go into a trance with it. But,
I liked it different.
Yeah, no, it's a good one. This entire album I think is great.
Yeah. There's no song on it that's like flat out bad.
Yeah,
it's pretty great all the way through. It's not a grunge album though.
Okay, I mean I'm not gonna debate that too hard. Okay, the last album we're gonna touch upon is by Soundgarden, the band that has stayed together the whole way through. But they never really they like were slow to break through. They were like more of like a steady beast, slow and steady beast to race kind of thing. The 1994, which is arguably the last good year of grunge.
1994. Okay, I thought you said 1984.
No, 1994, because that's also the year that that Kurt Cobain would commit suicide. Soundgarden released the album Superunknown, which I'm already gonna go right ahead and say that this album is too long.
Way too long.
It's so long. And also not only just like
it's 70 minutes long.
Yeah.
So
and like some of the songs that definitely could be cut back a little bit. I don't know.
But I think I really like this album because it's really different, and they have a lot of different influences to it than basically any other grunge band. Because I can't even figure out what the influences are. They kind of just like there's like psychedelic influences at points, and like they just kind of take from everything. Yeah, they have a song on there that's like that same like kind of like Eastern melody. Yeah, they have like Middle Eastern and Indian rhythms going on. And they have like the heaviness of Alice in Chains, but they have more of that, at least in moments, they have more of like some like pop melodies that come in. Right. So, like My Wave, that's a song I really liked in there because they had like more of that harder metal verses, but then they go into like the chorus. It's like that My Wave part that kind of sounds like, it has like it's almost like a major chord resolution. Almost. Yeah, and that's like that good, I don't know, just that more creative songwriting that wasn't and I wouldn't say it's not present in the rest of grunge, but like they're like really unique and really creative in the grunge scene. This is like very different. I think this album Superunknown is like the prime example of what grunge could achieve, if that makes any sense. Yeah. Like it's the most like far out grunge album. Yeah, it's like let's see where this genre can take us, and like this is like pretty much one of those extremes that it can take. Yeah. And I feel almost ill-equipped to talk about this album because like so much of like what I think is interesting is like goes over my head in terms of like I was reading up about like how many different like guitar tunings they used and like the different time signatures that they had, and apparently the producer that they got, what was this guy's name? Michael Beinhorn. He was just they said it was anal, that he was just so obsessive with like the kind of sounds that they would produce. And during the creation of this album, one of the members of the band, I forget which one, said that like basically the atmosphere while creating this was just like pure creativity, kind of like reaching for any sound that you can think of, trying to do like the most unique stuff that you can think of doing. So yeah, I mean, because this band, they knew grunge in and out. I mean, they've been doing this for years. So they were there during the creation of it, really. Right. Like they formed in 1984. Yeah, they were part of those like Deep Six compilation people. But yeah, no, they like the grunge is there. The grunge is there, obviously. Yeah, the grunge like there's like a heavy Black Sabbath all throughout, heavy Led Zeppelin, I think, all throughout as well. But like, you don't feel like as opposed to like their earlier albums, this is like not directly tied to punk anymore. It's not like, I mean, I guess you could still consider it a metal album, but like, it's just so different in how it's grunge. Like this is really, I think this is kind of like the epitome of grunge, a little bit.
In a sense, and it is.
Because you can't say it's this, you can't say it's that. Really, I think the most grunge albums that we're covering are Alice in Chains and this one.
I would say Alice in... Well, it's hard to define what's the most grunge, but I would say, to me, it's Alice in Chains. It has more of like what I think grunge is. Even though they're not quite punky enough. But this... I think maybe like Bad Motorfinger. Maybe it's one of the grungiest albums I can think of.
From them or just period?
Just period. But Superunknown, though, it just has so much like... Yeah, it's so creative, so out there. And they weren't the only bands that experimented with this kind of stuff. I chose this album because like it's kind of representative of what was going on in the mid-90s with a lot of these grunge bands. Not only them, but also Pearl Jam and Stone Temple Pilots. They would all go into more, try to harness their inner hippie, their inner psychedelic.
Experimenting more,
having more like Middle Eastern and Indian sounds.
Yeah, but you think like, do you think that that Soundgarden did the best with this album?
Yeah. In terms of like that kind of thing, yes. Not to say that these other bands didn't do it well, but like Soundgarden, like this is like a work. Like I don't know, this is like.
And that's the thing. This album is also way too long, obviously.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's a lot of songs on here I would take off. There's a couple, but
I would more like suggest like trimming down the songs. Some of these songs go on for too long. Like Suicide, I like that song, but it just goes on for too long.
Like Suicide. 4th of July, I think is also like 7 minutes. I love 4th of July though. It's just so there. The thing is, I love this album, and because it has such crushingly heavy moments. Like the beginning of 4th of July with just that heavy guitar riff and Chris Cornell singing is just mind-blowingly heavy with no elements to it. Just that guitar is so heavy, it just makes me want to cry because I'm like, it's just so oh my god. And also the song Mailman also has a crushingly heavy riff to it. And just those moments, that's what I love about grunge, is that they'll have that crushing heavy shit. It does have that. But then they'll still come back to like a little bit more of like pop melody or something, or more of that classic rock stuff.
It doesn't try to be like inaccessible. It tries to give you the goods while also giving you a ticket to join in. Somebody described this band as like, at least this album, being as heavy yet ethereal.
Yeah.
But also powerful but controlled.
And I think, Mailman also is a good example of that, because it has a super heavy riff, but then also like during the chorus, like Chris Cornell screaming, like riding you all the way, screaming that shit. But then there's also like the synth in the background that's kind of like floating up with that ethereal element. Yeah. And they do stuff like that all over this album. Yeah,
this album is very well made. Is very proficient, but there's also a lot of like emotion put in.
Yeah.
So it's great for somebody. I think this album, if anything, reminds me of like a modern jazz album in a sense. It's like creative, but still like full. It's not just like, it doesn't get tied up in its technicalities. It really like embraces both like far out compositions, but also like has all of these like really deeply felt emotions in it.
Yeah. And one of the songs that I'm surprised, honestly, that it became like their biggest hit, Black Hole Sun. Yeah. Because it has such strange sounds in it.
It is very strange, but it's also very, I don't know, it like glues to your mind almost.
Yeah, and it sounds like a dream, kind of. Yeah. Like it just sounds like some kind of a mirage or something that's not really happening. And like, because the guitar sounds, I think it's a guitar at least, that like it's so watery, and at least during the verses, it's like kind of a watery, reverby sound. But I really don't even know how they got that guitar tone for those verses. And then it also starts with a siren. I don't know. It's really nice. I like it a lot. Obviously, that's their biggest single ever. That's the song that everybody knows from Soundgarden.
My favorite is actually Spoon Man.
Spoon Man's great.
I love that
love
rhythm.
Spoon Man.
That like. And apparently that song was almost. It was written almost as a dare. Like
to me, that song sounds kind of like tamer, like Alice in Chains, like a more tame version of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it sounds more similar to like their original sound.
Yeah, I haven't heard their other stuff, so I would have to go back. But
you haven't heard "I'll Shine, I'll Shine."
No.
Or like. Oh, okay.
I before this,
my rusty cage.
I think I've heard that one before,
okay.
But I think the only things I've heard from Alice in Chains from Soundgarden before this were just the singles. So
yeah. Just probably those two singles. Probably.
Yeah, Spoon Man and Black Hole Sun.
Yeah. I gotta say, I think this album is very good, but it was the album that I had the hardest time getting into. And I think it's been years of me trying to get into this album. And I don't know if it's just that it's so dense.
Yeah. Well, it's like...
I like learned to appreciate it, but I haven't... I don't know. I haven't... Maybe I gotta listen to the earlier stuff first and get more acquainted with it.
Well, I think you're right, just the density of it, because it is 70 minutes. And they... experiment with so many different sounds and so much like it's really like kind of the peak of creativity in grunge and like the peak of like what people try to do differently with grunge. And I can see how it might be hard to get into, but once you get into it, it's so rewarding because there's just so many different aspects to it. It's like an album like Joanna Newsom's Take One on Me, Have One on Me, where it's 3 hours long. But it's 3 disc long. It's like 2 hours long and a little bit over 2 hours or something like that. But once you actually get into it and like listen to the whole thing, it's so rewarding.
I mean, I'll take you at your word for that. I mean, I did enjoy a lot of these songs. I just, it's just, it's definitely more of like a work if in itself than like a collection of songs. You have anything else to say about this album?
I love it. It's great.
Cool. Are we doing rankings for this, or are we just...
I mean, we can do rankings for this. This will be a hard one, though.
This will be a hard one. It's comparing, like, apples to oranges. But, like, maybe,
because they're so different.
Maybe we could just say, like, which ones we like the most, or, like,
well, to me, Mudhoney is at the bottom.
Okay.
I think
I would say that, too, but not because I found it disdainful. I liked it a lot too, but it just didn't.
I think it's also kind of unfair because it's not really an album, and it's also like the beginnings of grunge, so it's kind of forming that grunge sound. Yeah, but
but some people love it because it's so raw.
And I like that raw aspect too. It's just it's not my favorite. Yeah. But other than that, I mean, it's really hard ranking these.
It is hard.
I think Alice in Chains might be the next one up, even though I love them. But I think it might be Mudhoney, Alice in Chains. Then
from bottom to top.
Yeah, from bottom to top. Mudhoney, Alice in Chains. This is hard. Cause then you have Pearl Jam, Nirvana, and Soundgarden, and I'm like, I love all those three. I kind of like them all equally, but for different reasons.
Yeah, that's why it's hard to compare like the apples to oranges. But I don't know. I get what you're saying.
Because like all three of them, I think all three of those albums are amazing. The Alice in Chains album I love. It's just that I told you I have some problems with it. Yeah. And the Mudhoney one, I think it's good for what it is. But the other three I think are kind of like the pinnacle of grunge albums. Yeah. Except for Pearl Jam, that's not even a grunge album.
I would kind of agree with like that sentiment overall. But my ranking is a little bit more clear. Mudhoney is at the bottom. Nothing against it though. I would say this is probably what we'll diverge the most. I would put Soundgarden at 4th. Just because I don't know, I can't click with it's like
just because you're not enlightened enough to really understand what's going on.
It's also so long. I don't know. It's just like
the length is
it's a really demanding album.
Yeah, it is. It is.
So I mean, I can see that album growing on me more because I do think it's really well made. And also it's also the one that I know the least going into this whole thing. But right now it's at fourth. Then I'm gonna have Alice in Chains at third. And then I'm gonna put.
Ooh, this is gonna be controversial. Oh, Pearl Jam. Okay.
Pearl Jam, and then Nirvana.
I really thought you were gonna put Pearl Jam at the top.
No. Even though like I find myself listening to Versus more than Nevermind. In the past few years, I really like that album, and it's an album that I could put on anytime really. But Nirvana's Nevermind, I don't know. I think not only are like most of the songs they're killers, it's a supremely important album. I just can't get over that.
Yeah.
And yeah, Versus is a great album, but like if they had gone straight from 10 to Vitalogy, I don't think anybody would have really noticed.
Yeah.
Besides, we would have all been sadder for it because we wouldn't have this album, but
Okay, well, that was our breakdown of grunge. These are 5 albums that we think kind of encapsulate the different sounds of grunge, the different eras of grunge. And, of course we missed stuff. We didn't cover things. Tell us that you hate us. Tell us that we did everything wrong. Please comment.
That we chose the wrong albums from each of these bands.
Yeah.
That you think that, I don't know, Bad Motorfinger is better or
In Utero is better.
You think 10 is the best album of all time. Or
tell us this.
Yeah, or you think that Mother Love Bone was stripped of the show. Or maybe you think that grunge ended with the fall apart of Skin Yard or something. I don't know.
So yeah, tell us these things. Comment on our video. But before you do that, remember to like and comment, like and subscribe to us, and
smash that subscribe button.
Smash the like button. Smash the subscribe button. Then tell us that you hate us in the comments. But make sure you like us first.
Yeah, and besides the YouTube account that we have, Blood on the Mic, we also have a Twitter.
Yeah, Twitter account is at Blood on the Mic 1. Instagram is at Blood on the Mic. My personal Twitter is at Torna Lewis. Follow us
on Instagram as well. It's a dope Instagram.
Yeah,
if I do say so myself.
Great pictures.
Yeah, we put a lot of work into those pictures actually. So, yeah. All right. This has been Grunge. Our genre breakdown
of grunge. Thanks for listening.